In 1972, a man sat in a locked room at Stanford Research Institute and described in perfect detail a secret Soviet military installation on the other side of the world, down to the unusual shape of the buildings, the number of fuel tanks, and even the security perimeter that shouldn't have been visible from satellite imagery. He'd never seen the base. He didn't know its name or location. He was given nothing but a set of geographic coordinates. But when CIA analysts compared his drawings to their classified satellite photos, they went silent. The details matched with disturbing precision. It wasn't luck. It wasn't a leak. It was something the government would spend the next 20 years and millions of taxpayer dollars trying to understand. Remote viewing. Over 2 decades, the U.S. intelligence community would quietly build a classified psychic intelligence division known as Project Stargate, hidden inside military bases, buried in black budgets, and eventually uncovering phenomena that went far beyond Soviet installations. Some of it was science, some was fantasy, and some of it, as one remote viewer would discover, was something else entirely. Something that powerful people wanted kept hidden. Tonight, we're going inside the program they don't want you to believe was real, and the discoveries that may explain why. It started at SRI, Stanford Research Institute, not exactly where you'd expect a government-backed psychic spy program to begin. 2 laser physicists, Harold Puthoff, a former naval intelligence officer, and Russell Targ, a pioneer in laser technology, were experimenting with what they called expanded consciousness states. They weren't looking to commune with spirits. They were looking to quantify and potentially weaponize the human mind. Dr. Jessica Utz, professor of statistics at UC Irvine and one of the few academics who later evaluated the program, put it this way:
The evidence for psychic functioning is orders of magnitude stronger than the evidence for many accepted medical treatments.
But the program needed someone exceptional. That's when they met a man unlike any subject they had ever tested. Ingo Swann. Swann wasn't your typical, self-proclaimed psychic. He was a gifted artist from Telluride, Colorado, with a calm, analytical demeanor and an intellect that colleagues described as incisive. He approached his abilities with scientific detachment, more interested in measurement than mysticism. In controlled experiments at SRI, Swann demonstrated he could detect changes in electromagnetic fields, describe the contents of sealed boxes, and even influence sensitive magnetometers, devices measuring magnetic fields placed inside sealed, shielded chambers. But it wasn't until he correctly described the internal components of a top-secret NSA facility, down to the color coding of filing cabinets containing classified documents, that military intelligence took serious notice. He wasn't just intuitive. He was accurate, dangerously accurate. In the summer of 1975, Ingo Swann received an unexpected visit from a man who identified himself only as Mr. Axelrod at his hotel room in Washington, D.C. As Swann later wrote in Penetration, Mr. Axelrod revealed himself in this hotel room meeting, explaining that he represented a deep black program, one so classified it existed outside normal government oversight. They needed Swann's special abilities for something unprecedented, to remote view the moon. Not for Soviet bases this time, for something else entirely. Swann agreed, though with trepidation. But Axelrod was clear. This session couldn't happen just anywhere. For what they were about to attempt, they needed controlled conditions in a secure facility. 2 days later, Swann was escorted to an unmarked building, a facility Axelrod described only as one of our labs. The room contained advanced monitoring equipment, recording devices, and a team of silent observers behind a one-way mirror. Axelrod spread out several NASA lunar maps across a sterile metal table. With a steady hand, he pointed to a specific region on the moon, an area that warranted special attention. "Focus here," Axelrod instructed, tapping his finger on a particular set of coordinates. "Tell me what you see." The session began like any other. Coordinates, blank paper, the familiar descent into the viewing state. But the atmosphere in this facility made it clear. This was no ordinary target. What happened next would become one of the most controversial accounts in remote viewing history. As Swann's consciousness explored the lunar landscape, he began sketching rapidly. First describing the barren surface, then something unexpected, what appeared to be geometric patterns. Following these impressions, his perception led him to a ridge, overlooking a depression.
"There's something here,"
Swann noted, his hand moving across the paper with increasing urgency.
"Structures, not natural formations. Some kind of constructions connected by what looks like roads or paths."
Axelrod, who had remained silent, leaned forward. "Continue," he said quietly. Swann described seeing tower-like structures rising from the lunar surface, equipment that resembled machinery, and most controversially, indications of activity. As his perception approached one of the structures, Swann's breathing became rapid, his forehead beaded with sweat. His consciousness drew closer to what appeared to be a transparent portal or window in one of the structures. Looking through this opening, Swann reported seeing beings inside. Tall, thin humanoid figures moving with purpose and apparently engaged in some form of organized activity or work. Then, in what would become one of the most dramatic moments of his remote viewing career, Swann described how one of these beings suddenly stopped its work. The entity turned directly toward the window, as if sensing an intrusion. According to Swann's account in Penetration, the being not only looked in his direction, but seemed to perceive his consciousness observing from Earth. Swann reported that the entity actually pointed directly at him, acknowledging his psychic presence across the vast distance of space. Swann jolted upright in his chair, visibly disturbed.
"I've been noticed,"
he told Axelrod, his voice tense.
"Something detected my presence."
Axelrod's expression changed. "End the session," he commanded. "Pull back now." Swann was already severing the connection, his hands trembling as he pushed the sketches across the table. When Swann had fully emerged from his viewing state, shaken and pale, Axelrod studied the drawings with intense focus. The monitoring equipment had recorded unusual patterns in brainwave activity compared to previous sessions. Finally, Axelrod looked up and said with unusual seriousness, "This is exactly what we needed to confirm." Six months after the lunar viewing session, Swann received another mysterious contact from Axelrod. This time, it wasn't just for remote viewing. Axelrod wanted him in the field for direct observation. As detailed in Penetration, Swann was taken on a journey with security precautions, including being blindfolded during parts of the trip. When the blindfold was finally removed, Swann found himself in what he believed was Alaska, in a remote northern region. Two individuals who appeared remarkably similar served as security personnel. Their destination, a frozen lake in one of the most isolated areas of North America, accessible only by helicopter. Their mission, wait for something that would appear at a specific time. Swann later wrote about the extreme cold as they waited in a small cabin near the lakeshore. The temperature had dropped well below zero. Axelrod seemed focused, checking his watch periodically, his breath forming small clouds of vapor with each exhale. "We've been tracking this phenomenon," he told Swann, handing him specialized viewing equipment. "It follows a predictable pattern. At the appointed time, their equipment detected at first unusual electronic readings, compass anomalies, and a change in the ambient electrostatic field. Then the lake itself began to change. From Penetration, Swann described what happened next. The ice at the center of the lake began to crack in an unnatural, circular formation. Steam or vapor rose from the widening hole, despite the freezing temperature, and then something began to emerge. It wasn't what I expected. It had a distinctive triangular shape, moved without sound,
and emitted a soft luminescence.
The object rose from the water, hovering above the lake's surface, water streaming off its metallic exterior. It then began a systematic pattern of movement across the surrounding terrain. Its unmanned Axelrod explained in a low voice. A probe of some kind. We believe it's collecting samples, monitoring changes in the environment. Swann observed through the specialized equipment that the craft showed unusual thermal properties, despite having just emerged from freezing water. It moved with extraordinary precision, stopping at regular intervals to extend what appeared to be collection instruments. Then something alarming happened. The craft suddenly halted its pattern, its lights changed sequence, and it rotated toward their position.
"It's detected us,"
one of the security personnel warned.
"We need to move immediately."
Axelrod and the team quickly moved Swann back toward their transportation. As they retreated through the dense forest, Swann saw beams of unusual light, systematically scanning the area they had just occupied. The triangular craft moved with remarkable agility, navigating through the trees with precision. One of the security personnel was briefly affected by what Swann described as some kind of energy field that temporarily impaired movement but caused no lasting harm. When they finally reached their extraction point, Axelrod turned to Swann, his face visible in the unusual glow still perceptible through the trees. "Now you understand why this goes beyond remote viewing," he said, his voice calm despite the situation. "What we're dealing with involves physical presence and technology we don't fully comprehend." One of the most unusual chapters in Swann's penetration involves an encounter in an everyday setting, a Los Angeles supermarket in 1976. While shopping late one evening, Swann noticed a woman whose appearance caught his attention. As he described her, she was unusually tall with perfect proportions. Her hair was platinum blonde, her complexion flawless, but her eyes were what drew my attention, slightly larger than typical, with an unusual quality to them. What happened next, according to Swann, was particularly strange. The woman seemed to become aware of his attention, turning to look directly at him with what appeared to be alarm. In that moment, Swann described experiencing an unusual mental impression, a sense that something about this person was fundamentally different. The woman quickly left her shopping cart and moved toward the exit. Swann, driven by professional curiosity and instinct, observed from a distance. Outside, he witnessed her meet with two men who resembled the security personnel from his Alaska expedition, similar in height and appearance. As they departed in an unmarked vehicle, Swann believed one of them made deliberate eye contact with him from across the parking lot, a distance that should have made such specific recognition difficult. Swann wrote that the encounter reinforced his growing suspicion that what Axelrod's program was investigating wasn't limited to distant observations, but included possible presence here on Earth. Days later, he received a brief, anonymous phone call.
"Careful who you recognize. Careful who recognizes you."
He never encountered the woman again. As Project Stargate formalized under Pentagon funding, Swann didn't just participate, he systematized the entire approach. He called his methodology coordinate remote viewing, and it worked like this. The viewer would be given only a set of random numbers and letters, coordinates representing a target unknown to them. In a quiet room, with a blank sheet of paper and a pen, they would enter what Swann called the signal line, a meditative state where random mental noise falls away and perceptions begin to emerge. Former Army intelligence officer and Stargate operative Joseph McMonigal described the sensation. "It's like watching a Polaroid develop in your mind. First outlines, then textures, then colors and details. Your conscious mind doesn't know what you're looking at, but something else does." The viewer would sketch impressions, note sensations, describe structures, all while avoiding analytical overlay or guessing. The protocol was rigorous. Sessions were recorded. Results were verified against known sites, many of them Soviet military installations the CIA couldn't access any other way. By 1978, the program had expanded to include multiple remote viewers, dedicated facilities at Fort Meade, Maryland, and had garnered attention from the highest levels of military intelligence. But according to Swann's private journals, which would later become the controversial book Penetration, the most extraordinary tasks were yet to come. By the mid-1980s, Project Stargate had expanded significantly. Multiple remote viewers were now working on diverse targets, from tracking potential threats to locating missing persons and assets. But according to Swann and others who've spoken since, the program had also developed specialized focuses, including investigations into unusual phenomena and anomalies. Pat Price, another gifted remote viewer, had allegedly mapped what he described as unusual installations in several remote locations before his unexpected death in 1975. A death some program insiders considered worthy of further investigation. Joseph McMoneagle had reportedly been tasked with viewing unusual structures on Mars, not just current conditions, but specific time coordinates in the distant past when the planet might have had different environmental conditions. And Swann continued his work with specialized projects, focusing on phenomena that defied conventional explanation. From declassified documents and interviews with former program members, we now know the remote viewing program had significant success rates, a 65 to 70% accuracy rating for location descriptions, multiple confirmed cases of revealing information that was later verified by conventional means, successful location of sites and objects that traditional search methods had failed to find. But as Russell Targ later stated in a rare public interview, some of the most significant findings never made it into the declassified record. When viewers touched on certain subjects, the information would simply disappear into channels we weren't cleared to know about. In 1995, the CIA publicly announced that Project Stargate was being terminated. The official reason: the results were inconsistent. The program offered no actionable intelligence value. This conclusion came from an evaluation by the American Institutes for Research, an assessment that many former program participants have since called incomplete and misleading. Dr. Edwin May, who directed the scientific side of Stargate from 1985 to 1995, stated firmly,
The evaluation failed to account for the program's most successful aspects. Significant elements were either overlooked or placed beyond the reach of the evaluators due to classification.
Indeed, documents declassified in the early 2000s revealed that the program had achieved notable intelligence successes, from locating critical targets to identifying hidden facilities that conventional intelligence had missed. So why shut it down? According to Swann's later writings before his death in 2013, the answer may lie in what the program was beginning to uncover, not just about conventional threats, but about phenomena that challenged established understanding. In one of his last interviews, Swann made a measured statement.
The real question isn't whether remote viewing works. The evidence supports that it does under proper conditions. The question is what implications arise from its successful applications, especially when the findings challenge conventional frameworks.
Former intelligence officials who spoke on condition of anonymity have suggested that elements of the program simply moved into more specialized access programs with greater security protocols. As one former Defense Intelligence Agency official put it,
You don't invest 2 decades and significant resources developing a capability, then abandon it because a public report questions its value. You adapt how you manage and utilize that capability.
Ingo Swann spent his final years teaching others his remote viewing methodology. He maintained the authenticity of his accounts about the moon, Alaska, and other unusual encounters. His book Penetration remains difficult to find, published in limited quantities that quickly sell out. Some have suggested this limited availability reflects the controversial nature of its contents. What makes Swann's account particularly notable is his professional reputation. Colleagues described him as methodical, skeptical, and precise, not given to exaggeration. His artwork, displayed in collections worldwide, shows the same attention to detail that made him valuable to intelligence agencies. Dr. Hal Puthoff, who worked closely with Swann for decades, said this after his death.
Ingo wasn't interested in belief or disbelief. He was interested in data. He approached the extraordinary with the mind of a scientist and the perception of an artist. If he said he saw something, I learned to take it seriously, even when it challenged existing paradigms.
In 2001, 2 years before his death, Swann made a thoughtful statement in a rarely seen interview.
I've been asked if I'm concerned about discussing what I experienced. The truth is, I've shared what I believe is important. Some elements remain difficult to integrate into conventional understanding, but the fundamental question remains: what are the true limits of human perception, and what might we discover when we extend beyond those assumed boundaries?
So what can we verify, and what remains in the realm of the unproven? Confirmed, the US government funded and ran Project Stargate and similar programs under code names like Grill Flame, Center Lane, and Sunstreak for over 20 years. Thousands of declassified documents prove this beyond any doubt. Confirmed, Ingo Swann was indeed one of the program's founders and principal remote viewers. His work is documented in government records. Confirmed, remote viewers in the program did successfully identify numerous targets that conventional intelligence couldn't access, with statistical significance far beyond chance. Confirmed, the program's termination in 1995 came despite evidence of success, with many insiders disputing the negative assessment. Unconfirmed, the specific details of structures and activity on the moon as described by Swann. Unconfirmed, the Alaska expedition and the encounter with the triangular craft that emerged from the frozen lake. Unconfirmed, the supermarket incident involving the unusual individual. But maybe the real questions aren't about proof. They're about implication. If the human mind can see across oceans, across locked vaults, and even across the void of space, then what is consciousness, really? If places like the moon or remote regions of Earth are hiding structured activity, who or what is doing the hiding? And if phenomena exist that bend space, time, and logic itself, maybe the real question is this: are we witnesses or participants in something far larger than we can understand? You've been listening to Veiled Protocol,
And I am Echo.
If tonight's transmission cracked open your sense of what's possible, don't let it close again. Remember, sometimes the most significant discoveries are waiting just beyond our current understanding.